And I know that you said that you haven't had the chance yet to sort of see how that transition process has gone. Do you know
Mhm.
when you're planning to survey the teachers or to see if those revisions were working well?
Right. So we did send out a second survey in the fall this year to complete the changes to the process, which were things like sending a virtual folder of the children's work samples. As in preschool, that would be pictures of things that they've built, drawn, created, projects that they've done. It's also videos, possibly, of the children who are participating in a literature circle or sitting at the table working on a speech and language goal. And so we put some of those things into place for this coming year for the children to have those little virtual folders, not just sending paper over to the elementary school. We've always had sharing meetings with the elementary school, which is where our elementary teachers and preschool teachers get together to talk about each particular student who is coming and transitioning to K. However, we did them virtually last year. What I got back from principals, assistant principals, and staff was that that was very helpful because there was not as much travel time that needed to be done. And so people were able to spend more time talking about children and less time trying to travel around to all the different buildings. Um, so we put that into place as well. We also did something which was just an organizer for each group to kind of comment on how the meeting went, who was responsible for what as they were moving forward, so that they had an action plan. And that also seemed to be helpful in the process. So we put all of those three things into place for this coming school year.
Oh, so that's fantastic. And on another positive note, I heard, saw that you were discussing the listening circle, which was, support for parents.
Mhm. Very successful.
That it was, I'm really amazed. To me, I mean, family engagement is so key and so important, especially for parents with students with additional needs.
Mhm.
I was just wondering, I know we got a grant for it from the Alliance, as you know.
Mhm.
Have you considered working with kindergarten or elementary schools to sort of create a version of the listening circle for some of these families as they move forward? Just such a great idea.
Yes. So actually one of the preschool staff was just on a few minutes ago listening. So if she's still listening, Sabrina Mata was one of those people who did write the grant, and we are expanding into the elementary schools and trying to offer that. We found it to be very, very successful. We truly believe in parent engagement and training, which is something that we do provide not only on a monthly basis with parent chats, both during the day and the evening, but also on an individual basis for children who are requiring things at home. Everyone has parenting needs and questions, and so we do try to do that on an individual basis for all of our children.
I would love to recommend, that there's some way we can connect, you with the parents in SEAC to share that service going forward for a lot of the families, or, for our special education, um, through PTA council or something, because they could be helpful and also helping with
Right.
that. I'm so impressed. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
your incredible report on both ends of our spectrum, our youngest and our oldest learners. So thank you.
So just one more piece is that the listening space was placed in Mary's special education newsletter last week, so that other parents can take a look at that from other grade levels.
Extra kudos. So thank you.
No problem.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Amy, impressive work. I'm very happy to hear what you're involved in, what you're doing. I do a little volunteer work myself with the older kids, so I can more relate to Diane than you, Amy. But Diane, you got it going on. Holy smokes, well done, very impressive. As you know, I do a little bit of work with internships and some work with the older kids, some sports related stuff. But I was going to offer my services. If anything you possibly need that I can do, please reach out. But certainly you sound like you got it going on. So keep doing what you're doing. And I'm happy to help if you want to just contact me for anything. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it. And, this program's been going on for a number of years. So it's been a program that's kind of morphed and developed over the years. I'm just happy to be part of it and to bring a different, kind of viewpoint into it. And like I said, everybody works really, really well together. It's nice. It's nice to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Downey.
I'm guessing, I'm not sure. I think this is probably a Mary question or Amy. So we have these kids from birth to 3 who are evolving and they're showing up over the course of the year. But with our ratios of students in the classrooms are 6 to 9, how do you wind up doing how do you manage your classroom sizes? Because you've got this evolving group of kids who you don't really know necessarily when they're going to show up. In terms of your staffing. And I'm just trying to kind of think it through how it all works.
This has always been a very difficult process for everyone to understand, which is why I did the student projection chart for you so that you can see. We really have to base it on looking at the trends and the numbers that we received over the last, I have 10 years of data. So, how many children we've been receiving. Birth to 3 does give us a heads up about 3 months in advance of any parent who is willing to sign off for confidentiality reasons that they're ready to go to transition. So that's why I know that we're going to end up somewhere around 93 students special needs, because we have the next 3 months of children with birth to 3. We're getting a lot of twins. Oh my goodness. So that doubles it. But we do have that information from birth to 3. And we do know that because we run about 50-50 with the community and the trends, that's how we look at the numbers. Now, as far as the classrooms go, best practice is to try to balance them out, just like you do in elementary school, boys and girls, 3s and 4s. We do like the model of the mix of 3 to 4s because we do have the 4-year-olds giving some real nice models to the 3-year-olds who are coming into school. And so we do have to look at that as we are placing children in a class. We do also look at the level of impact of the disability on the general ed curriculum. We certainly don't want to have 6 children who have high needs in one room with the teacher. So we want to look at how we're kind of balancing that out. So as each child comes in, we really are individually looking at the child and the best placement in which classroom. What we like to do is to be able to project out how many classrooms we need and leave a few seats open in each room. So that as they come in, we're placing them in an appropriate spot and not just.
So your ratio is a little different at the start of the year than it is at the end of the year.
Yes, and unfortunately, if we get more children, then our ratio goes higher.
So you're not, you're not pulling in tuition students from the lottery later in the year. You kind of make that assessment at the start of the year, because we are turning away a lot of students. I mean, then the number seems to be growing.
Yes, I have to say I'm so pleased we're so popular, but nothing is worse than the week after we have to send the letters out from the preschool office to tell people they don't have a spot. We would love to be able to give all 202 applicants a spot. We really would. That's a big budget implication, so that therein lies with that. But we would love to be able to take in all 202 applicants, and I can't tell you the phone calls and the begging and pleading that we've had in the last week or so, because the letters just went home. This particular year with COVID, we did have some students who declined at the last minute and pulled out, and so we were able to go through our wait list. We do keep the wait list very up to date. And then we look at our wait list, as opposed to if a 3-year-old girl dropped out, then we're pulling another 3-year-old girl from the wait list, who's the next one in line. And we did offer to quite a few waitlisted children this year. It doesn't always
Is it typically balanced between 3s and 4s?
We
The
try-
number?
We try to keep it balanced between the 3s and 4s as best as we can. You want your 4-year-olds to have peers that are of the same age, and your 3-year-olds to have peers of the same age. We try not to have, too many of one age and the other. We also have to remember that as the typicals students come in, so those are our lottery students, they can be as young as 2.8 years old. Because they're
Wow.
now waiting for their 3rd birthday. So we have children who are 2.8 years old in the classroom, which means lots of teaching basic skills, all the things that they need in order not to just go to kindergarten, but in life. So we're potty training. We are teaching children how to self-feed. We're teaching children how to hang up their coat, where to put their book bag, how to just sit for a few minutes at one activity. At 2.8 years old, their attention spans are about 5 minutes. So we're looking at, a wide range of ages.
Thanks, Anne.
And just to follow up, your staffing in terms of paraprofessionals in the classroom, or is it based on the disabilities, or do you have a general staffing model that you're using of how many?
Right. So we've used a general staffing model in preschool for instructional assistants, and it's really based on what the National Association for Young Children would also recommend as far as the number of children in the room, and then the number of children with special needs. And we look at it that way. So we have 1 full-time assistant in all of the non-magnet schools, which are the 5-hour days. And then 2.7 assistants as well. And
in where?
In each classroom in the non-magnets. So that's OG and North Street.
I'm sorry, so it's 1 or 2.7?
full-time. Sorry, it's okay. It's 3 people, but it's 1 full-time assistant and 2.7 assistants. They come in
2.7, 2, not a 2. Oh, okay, 2.
Come in with the
times.
children, go out
Okay.
with the children.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then
okay.
in magnets, it's 2 full-times because they have an extended day. And they receive specials at the end of their day. And so for that extended day, we need coverage for the students who stay for the extended day to go with the PE teacher or the music teacher, etc. That's when our teacher is taking their lunch and their prep and attending to all of the collaboration meetings that need to occur.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Miss Olson.
Yes, thank you for that really thorough report. And I'm sorry to be off camera. My own 4-year-old just woke up, so I'm sitting in like a pitch black room. So wouldn't matter if my camera was on, you wouldn't see me.
That happens.
But I just wanted to say too, I kind of echo a little bit of what Ms. Hirsch said. I'm really excited about the family engagement component. And, I think that, we're understanding more and more family engagement isn't just about, is really about partnering with the families and, and building that communication, which is what's happening here, and I think it was mentioned through the Alliance, or was funded through the Alliance originally, like the families as partners in learning. And I hope that program and that continues, and we see more and more of that, because clearly the benefits are paramount to the success of our children. So I'm happy to see that, and I hope to see more of that.
Thank you.
All right, well, that'll wrap up this item. Thank you, everybody. Good update, and we appreciate the hard work going into it. So our next item will be the digital learning update. Mr. Ting. Welcome back.
Good evening, members of the board, fellow members of cabinet, GPS staff, students, and all other meeting attendees. Thank you for staying with us so late into the evening. I'm Michael Ting, CTO of Greenwich Public Schools, and my job is to help people with their computers. What I'll be talking about tonight is an update to the board in the areas of technology and digital learning. We'll be discussing the DLE update report, which can be found on our Board Docs website. For those that don't have a copy of the report, if you would like a copy, you can go to the greenwichschools.org website, click on Board of Education, then roughly in the middle of the page, look for meeting agendas, and then click on the Board Docs link. Now, before we begin, I'd like everyone to think about where we were technology-wise 1 year ago. A year ago, we didn't have remote learning, we didn't have video conferencing, and we didn't have the option whether to attend school in person or fully remote. In just 1 year, we've seen rapid change across the school district in many aspects of instruction and infrastructure. And when I say we, I mean all of us, the board, school staff, students, parents, all of us have experienced this change and have adapted, learned, and grown in some way. I look around today and I see teachers and students collaborating online, classes being streamed to students at home, students raising their hands virtually, teachers taking attendance with Google Meet, 1,500 students enrolled in full-time remote learning, and many other things that represent how far we've come as a school district in just 1 year. Now, tonight, we're looking at exactly where we are with technology in the school district. The DLE update report is a 30-page document with a lot of information. And if you're interested in details such as our mobile device management platform, what generation iPad we're using, where we use Macs versus where we use Windows computers, and the like, I recommend that you go to our website and read the report in its entirety. At this time, I'm not going to go through the report page by page, but I will give you the highlights. So first of all, it's important to know that the concept of digital learning goes beyond any single department at Greenwich Public Schools. I often get questions about certain aspects of digital learning that I do not oversee, because when people think about digital learning, they naturally think technology. But digital learning is about much more than just the technology. I mean, there's a lot of thought and planning that's put into place before any technology is implemented, before an iPad is handed out to an elementary student, before you receive your login credentials to an app in the digital toolbox, and a lot of coordination between departments goes into that. So my piece of the puzzle consists of infrastructure and hardware. Now, what does that mean exactly? Basically, it means network security, availability, servers, workstations, and devices. So now I'd like to take a few minutes to review the current state of infrastructure and hardware in the school district. As I said earlier, for the purposes of this meeting, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but rather just give you the highlights. So there are 9 areas here to speak to. So number 1 is our district internet usage. Internet usage went up by a factor of 2. That's roughly double that of the year before. Now, this was expected, and bandwidth requirements were tested ahead of time, making this a non-issue. Furthermore, at current bandwidth usage rates, we're not in danger of running out of bandwidth, nor will we experience cost increases in this area. Number 2, student devices. We use iPads in elementary and Chromebooks in secondary. There are approximately 5,500 iPads and 6,000 Chromebooks in the school district. Number 3, device management. For iPads, we use a platform called Jamf Pro. For Chromebooks, we use the built-in management tools of the Google platform. Number 4, classroom computers. We use the Mac platform for elementary schools and middle schools, and we use Microsoft Windows at the high school. Now, at this point, you may be thinking that you're going to need a table to list all of the various grade levels, classroom computer platforms, student device platforms, and you might be thinking, how can we support so many different types of devices at the same time? And you would be right to think along these lines. So we recognize that these technology stacks need to be streamlined for efficiency, and that is an entire discussion in itself. For now, know that we do see and acknowledge the possibly overly complex model that we're currently using. Number 5, classroom displays. So the school district standardizes on the smart board platform. Number 6, elementary remote learning hardware. We take feedback seriously, and upon hearing the deficiencies with using an iPad as a primary device for teaching remotely, Dr. Jones and her cabinet began an initiative to upgrade our elementary teachers to a proper laptop. I'm happy to say that we were able to get to a place where we provided every elementary teacher with a MacBook Air at the start of the school year. Number 7, secondary remote learning hardware. So during the summer of 2020, we installed camera and microphone equipment in every middle school and every high school classroom. Big thanks to Tony Brenna and his team for going above and beyond during this time to ensure that everything was ready before the start of school. Number 8, Google Meet. So before the start of the school year, we knew we wanted to use Google Meet as our remote learning communications platform. However, we had several challenges ahead of us that needed resolution before that could happen. Long story short, we took on a huge project to merge our staff and student Google domains into a single domain, which was one of the most technically challenging and difficult projects ever undertaken by this department, but it had to be done. Big thank you to Chris D'Angelo and Ganesh Nair for pulling this off almost flawlessly in such an aggressive time frame with no data loss and minimal interruption in service. Now I say almost flawlessly because who remembers having to change their password 4 times in a row back in August? Moving on. Cybersecurity. The school district's first cybersecurity training initiative was kicked off in October of 2020. In 4 months, over 1,200 GPS staff have taken and completed security training. As this was the first training offering, we focused on the training process itself and assigned some of the more simple but still important security topics. We hope to expand on this training next year if the BET approves the funding in this area. Now that we've covered the technology that's currently in use across the school district, let's talk about one of the problems we're seeing with tech in the school district, specifically the problem with the Chromebook platform in the middle schools and the high school. Now, there's a lot of detail in the DLE update report, which includes various platform specifications, part numbers, processor speeds, etc. Please refer to the report if you would like to read about these details.
Mike, before you go on, do you have slides for us, or you're just going to refer back to the report, which is fine. I'm following, but I just want to make sure if you had slides, if you wanted to share them.
Oh, I do not have slides. I'm simply referring to the written report.
No worries. Thank you. Following along.
You're welcome. I'm going to summarize the problem by saying that the current device is inadequate in terms of computing power for the demands of the school district, specifically with regard to the Google Meet platform. Simply put, running a Google Meet ties up so much of the resources of the device that it makes doing other things on the device at the same time difficult to nearly impossible. With this in mind, it's easy to see why so many students use a second personally owned device for school. Now, how can we solve this problem? The report offers 4 potential solutions, not that these are the only solutions available. However, they are presented as several potential solutions to the problem at hand. The 4 solutions are option 1, use the same device, upgrade the processor. Option 2, use the same device, upgrade not just the processor, but all the specs of the machine. Option 3, upgrade to a Windows laptop. And option 4, which is upgrade to a Mac laptop. Now, the first 3 options have costs associated that are roughly in line with the current budget, maybe slightly higher. The 4th solution, the Mac laptop, is significantly more expensive, However, keep in mind that the Mac laptop is also a significantly more powerful device. If cost were not an issue, the Apple laptop is the clear choice here. It's important to mention that this information is being presented at a time when no decision has been made in this area. And in fact, we are hoping to get the board's feedback on this before moving forward. There are still some big questions that need to be answered before we can make a decision one way or another. Questions such as, how is the school district going to fund these increased costs? This is an obvious question as cost is a big factor in any decision. Can we solve this problem another way, maybe by using different software? For example, would a different video conferencing platform, such as Zoom, be less resource intensive than Google Meet? If it is less resource intensive, how difficult would it be to implement in the middle of the school year when we've already come so far with Google Meet? What is the overall timeline considering the budget cycle? I mean, it's budget time right now. And in fact, Peter, Tony, Sean, and I were in budget meetings with the BET just this morning. So given that we already have a budget set for fiscal year 21-22, any change that would need to be included during budget planning this time next year would not take effect until the year after that. So timeline is a big question mark. Now, I know I've talked a lot and I promise I'm almost done. I would encourage everyone to read Appendix A of the DLE update report, which includes the results of the technology survey that was sent to our high school students. We realize that the response rate was relatively low, but that does not necessarily mean that the results from questions like, if you could choose any device, would change from the overwhelming response of Apple laptop with a larger sample set. And that takes us to the end of the report. So what did we learn here? I would say the top 3 takeaways from this would be, number 1, technology is hard and we make it harder on ourselves by supporting so many different types of devices. Number 2, we need to upgrade the secondary student device platform and need to figure out how to do that in the most effective manner. And number 3, our high school students apparently love Apple laptops, and this makes me feel old-fashioned as I'm a Windows guy myself. And that brings us to the end of my talk. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Mike, thank you so much. You know, a huge shout out to you and your entire team for basically working all summer and preparing for the onslaught of starting the school year. I know even under normal circumstances, you're getting the replacement laptops ready and all the rest, but this year was especially tough. You did a lot of advanced planning, you got the network running, and you know, to the point where you knew you could handle the capacity. So just shout out to the entire team, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein.
So you know, I've looked at the secondary laptop issue, and obviously I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, so I hear it at home. You know, most students who are doing learning remotely do need 2 devices if one of them is the school computer. But what we know, and we've known for years, is we sort of have a quasi BYOD situation going on where students are using their own devices. And I guess a question for you is whether we could formalize that in any way that it would bring down the need. I know we're on a 3-year replacement for middle school and a 4-year replacement for the high school, whether that would bring down the need to buy additional devices. That's one way to look at it. The other is the nominal cost of moving up to the Intel chip, which your report very clearly shows has a much better capacity than the AMD chip. You know, is incremental. I think it's $25 a unit. So, you know, if we lessen the number of devices we need to purchase and we purchase devices that are incrementally better, you know, I think that leaves us in good shape. I'm a Mac guy, I have been for years, but I'm styling a 2013 MacBook Air right now, so probably need a replacement. And I I don't know that MacBook Airs would be my choice for a middle schooler or high schooler that are taking it in and out of their bag, or moving it around a lot. So anyway, my thoughts, but I'm curious as to where we could go on the BYOD question, because it is a huge cost to us every year. And we've heard people before say they've got school laptops sitting in closets, and maybe we don't need to be purchasing everything.
I'm going to answer that question by saying that the change to a BYOD model would be significant and is an entire project in and of itself, with all of the variables and possibilities involved. At present, we're very focused on providing our students with known, stable tech platforms to get us through the pandemic. BYOD is a big change. It's a big project. It's not something we're ready to take on right now at this time.
I guess I do want to push though, Mike, on that a little bit, because we do know, and I have one of my kids is using a Surface and the other one is using the school laptop. So we do know there are a lot of kids that are using their own devices. I know it's a challenge from a management standpoint. So
Right now, it's great that there are some students that are able to run everything that needs to be run on a personally owned device. I don't know that every student would have that ability to run on their own device. So there is an equity issue, there's security issues, there's support issues. There's a lot to think about.
well, as long as we're thinking about it, I think is the big idea there. All right, Miss Downey.
I'm going to tandem because Peter read my mind. I have a couple of like smaller questions too, but this whole notion of devices going unused, that people say, oh, my kid's Chromebook's sitting in a closet, maybe not a full BYOD kind of thing, but suggesting to people that if their students aren't using the school provided ones, can we have some program or make people aware of the fact that there are students who are struggling with the existing ones? Because if this is a long-term cycle, in order to address it, can we get those people, capture the X number of them to give them back so that we then have them, and maybe some kids could get deployed 2 of them? I don't know, has any thought been given to something like that?
I think we would need some data to pick a direction to go in there. So what we could do is, what I can tell you right now is, as far as Chromebooks are concerned, there's a 95% take rate. So less than 5% of the students turn down the device. So of those 95% that are currently in the hands of students, it wouldn't be that big of a lift to perform an audit of the usage of said devices. Maybe just check when was the last time this device was logged in, times the 6,000 devices, and see what problem are we trying to solve? Is it really a problem that a lot of these devices are handed out and go unused?
Right, because if that's the case, I think that changes our approach, right? If a third of them, pick a number, yeah, right? I think that, to me, that seems like a worthwhile use of time, if that's a relatively easy thing, and then that gives you some data to go in a direction.
I'll pull some numbers.
Kind of changing gears, I just want to understand the numbers too, because in your report you make reference to 5,500 iPads and about 6,000 Chromebooks, which is obviously more than the number of students we have. Is it that we have a reserve or for replacements, or what? Could you just talk through those numbers?
It includes staff devices as well.
Okay. But I thought the elementary school staff have Apple laptops.
They also have iPads that they were issued before they got the laptops.
Okay, so elementary school staff have iPads.
Yep, and all secondary staff have Chromebooks as well.
Oh, okay. And then to the extent we do whatever, let's just say, I know you said all the kids want an Apple laptop, right? If we ultimately, are there ways for us to purchase things like this, or give parents the opportunity to get the preferential educational pricing on something? Obviously we have to decide what we're doing, but what options are there? Because that's obviously a much more attractive price for an Apple laptop than if you go into the Apple store. So,
I was going to say that we don't get that big a discount from Apple,
oh, we don't.
even though we purchase
Okay.
in volume, and we are an educational institution. I think for example, an iPad, they might give us $5 off per unit, but it's not
geez.
50% off or anything like that.
Okay. But your price for like $800 for an Apple laptop, that's,
Mhm.
or is that just because that's kind of kind of the basic one, not the ones that the kids going to college want with every bell and whistle?
Right, $779 is the least expensive model that you can get.
Okay. Okay. No, it's just, it's a dilemma, but I would be interested in the data on the usage on the
Sure.
Chromebook. So I like that. So, but it's about you said about a 3-year cycle. So we're basically looking at this for budget cycle that's going to start in a year, not for the upcoming year. Whatever
we were
decisions
to-
made about the secondary devices.
Yep, if we were going to follow the current budgetary process, that's what the timeline looks like. There might be other options. We don't know at this point in time.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Very informative.
You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Sorry, had to take myself off mute. Mike, thank you for not just a fantastic report, but for you and your entire staff. I cannot tell you, I know the speed with which you guys jump right in and take care of things, whether it's a cybersecurity issue or there's issues with, Google Meets or Zoom or any of the other issues that our students are having. And yes, that means having to sign up for your password multiple times over the summer. You were absolutely, the speed with which you guys handle things and get our students back on track is absolutely fantastic. And I thank you for taking the deep dive into the things that our district truly needs to make sure that our students are getting what they need and our staff is able to deliver it. The issue with Chromebook performance has been raised long before we moved to the remote learning platform of educational delivery. And as you know, we've discussed it many times, many students choose to bring their own devices, mine included. So I will admit that I have 2 Chromebooks that may not have been used, except for when one of our laptops went down and my daughter had to use it because it didn't really support what she needed to do. So I know I had asked this before, but of the options listed in the report, what is it that you truly feel would allow our students to have the best access to, to their education?
If cost were not a factor, and it is a major factor, of the options that are listed in the report, my recommendation would be to go with the Apple laptop, as it is the fastest, most powerful device, and it runs an actual operating system as opposed to a Chromebook, which means that you can install things like Microsoft Office.
And so do you think that, I was gonna say the lifetime on a Mac laptop seems to last a little bit longer, oftentimes in the Chromebook, with the update to the iOS and things. So might it possibly be that we get a longer lifespan out of those laptops than versus the Chromebooks, which I know when my children were using them, oftentimes it would, die within a year?
I would say yes. The Mac laptop is definitely a more robust, better built device. And, it would be my hope that if a student were handed a device of that caliber, that they would be more inclined to take care of it. I could be proven completely wrong in this situation. But right now I could say, yes, I would expect that the refresh cycle could possibly be increased from 3.5 years to 4 years or even 5 years.
So that might actually end up, even though the device costs more at the outset, it may still, like over time, amortize to be less.
Absolutely, yes. We could play with the numbers and see if we can make something work.
And then the other question I know I had asked before, and I know you won't have the answer tonight, is do we know what other districts are using? In the Fairfield region in New York, New Jersey, those that are similar to us.
My kids go to Weston Public Schools and they are issued Chromebooks. And I have heard Tony mention that she was issued a Chromebook in Fairfield.
I mean, I know that during my CABE call and my CES calls, I will certainly put the question out to see what other districts are using, because I think that would sort of also help us make that kind of decision. But I will also say, I think the other question to ask is for some of the staff. I know when my son entered the high school, one of the courses he was taking, he could not access a program on the Chromebook. We ended up having to buy him, well, we didn't have to, but we had bought him a Mac because he couldn't use the Chromebook to do some of the editing work that he was doing. So I know that there are some apps and things and programs that the staff uses at the high school for classes that may not be accessible on Chromebook.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need to look into that as well. But that's just as an aside. Either way, thank you for doing the research and the deep dive. I know this is something we've looked into for a long time, and not for tonight, but once we are through COVID and are not focused as much on remote school. I know you briefly mentioned it in your report, but screen time, I know it's something that has been a long-term discussion here. We can't really discuss screen time now, but at some point down the road, I'd love to sort of bring that back to the table.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
Okay, ditto on how far we've come. It's kind of amazing. We're almost a year into this pandemic, and I think about how seamlessly we went to remote school today for a snow day. And Tony, I'd like to know what you're doing tomorrow. Are we going to be doing that again? Many constituents here want to know. But I think it's incredible. And Michael, I'm so happy you walked us through that, because, we all kind of lose sometimes. We just start to expect these things to happen, and it's important to note how far we've come. With that, two things. You are 100% right. It's people either require two devices, and you don't want to see how big my second computer is over here. And so I know that I use two devices throughout my day, or you need a much more robust processor, right? And so again, middle school student who, by the way, did turn his Chromebook back in because I thought not appropriate for us to leave in the closet. So did turn his Chromebook back in and is using a much more, powerful machine. I like the idea that we're all echoing here, that we need to do some sort of analysis. We need to make sure that everyone has access to a robust device and make sure that there's equity. But if some people are able to provide for that, does that allow us for, the capital to go out and buy better devices for others that can't? And with that, Michael, I totally defer to you. I'm a Windows gal too, but I am, I believe we always have to learn from the next generation. So if you think that that's Apple, then perhaps that's the best. With the current budget though, because I don't want to wait 2 years, which is what we're talking about, if we have to wait for the next budget cycle, when that's, time lost for all these students. The current budget we have there is 2.3 million, right, for the technology?
It's 1.4, 1.35, somewhere around there in DLE capital for student devices.
Okay, and so that is exactly like just replacing the Chromebooks. Like, what exactly is in that, and do we have the ability to rethink that? I guess that number.
So roughly 75% of the DLE capital budget goes directly towards the purchase of student devices. Off the top of my head, I think it's something like 560,000 per year for Chromebooks, and slightly less than that for iPads.
Okay.
I should know this. I just presented this this morning to the BET, but as Ms. Olson said earlier, it's late and I'm losing the words.
No, that's right. And I was going to say, I mean, if we're contracted to do that, then so be it. But if we have flexibility at this point to still perhaps, change courses here and stay within that budget, but perhaps address our needs more quickly, I'd like to look into that. So.
I can tell you that in a very wise move, Dr. Jones asked us to cancel the Chromebook order for next year, which effectively freed up the $560,000. So we have some flexibility there.
Okay, great. Well, I will stop then right at this point in the evening. Thank you so much.
Mr. Scher.
I'm trying to get off mute. Michael, I wanted to ask some basic questions that weren't in your report.
Sure.
And I want to divide the user base because we have really 5 different user bases. And I think to talk about them in a really unified way, which your report does a lot, might not be as help us draw the insights that we need to draw. So I want to ask you about applications, the educational applications that we are using for students in middle school and high school. Which of those applications are not cloud-based? In the standard application suite for students in middle school and high school, which applications are not cloud-based?
So I am not in charge of the digital toolbox. That being said, I'm pretty sure 100% of the applications that are in the 612 toolbox are cloud-based because there's nothing installed locally on the Chromebook.
Yeah, right. Okay. And for the teaching staff that support those teachers, middle school and high school, what's in their application suite that is standardized from the district?
So for middle schools, the teachers would have access to a Mac desktop
Yeah.
in their classrooms. And on that Mac desktop, you would have the Smart Notebook suite. You would obviously have Chrome with access to the entire G Suite, things of that nature. Now at the high school,
Mhm.
the high school is a completely different animal. The
Okay.
high school runs Windows, and all of the Windows computers are in an Active Directory domain. And those Windows computers would have Windows software such as Microsoft Office
Mhm.
installed, along with the Smart Suite, and obviously Chrome and things like that.
Okay.
But I guess where I'm
And
going with
then, and then,
that is we have a directory service at the high school.
yeah, I know.
Do not have a directory service for K through 8, and
Yeah,
that is a big problem.
I'm not sure I know why that's a big problem, but okay, let me stay with my questions because we can go off in a tangent. And then at the elementary school, for students at the elementary school, we have a set of applications that are all iOS based, right?
Yes,
Or
so in the digital
they're not,
toolbox,
are they allowed to use web-based apps? Are they allowed to use the internet?
so they are allowed to use the internet in a very content filtered manner.
Mhm. Okay.
But from what I understand in the digital toolbox, if there is an app, an actual custom written app, we would
Mhm.
definitely prefer that over the web-based application.
Okay. The reason I make that point is that for middle school and high school, and I didn't understand what you were saying, but when you were saying about BOD being a heavy lift, what are you talking about? I mean,
So
I know about BOD, so you can just explain it to me in simple form.
sure, so from the IT,
Why do you think that is a heavy lift? What part of that
because
is a heavy lift from your perspective?
for the IT department, there are certain technology stacks that we support and I would consider us experts in. If you go to a BYOD model and you start bringing in different platforms,
Mhm.
that complicates things quite a bit. For example, at the high school, where it's a Windows environment, you now have IT staff that potentially would be supporting Macs, which they might not have seen before.
Oh, okay, that's not what we're talking. That wasn't really what we were talking about. Okay, that's what I thought you meant. Okay, so what impediments do you see? Here's where I'm going. I don't think we're talking about what we issue to employees. I don't even think that's part of the conversation. I think this conversation is all about what do we issue to students. You know, I don't understand. I mean, look, I don't know what the suite, the app, this all driven off the application suite. I think people who live in technology, you know, they kind of live with technology, but they don't actually understand what's involved in managing technology. Um, and you do, I do, because I've been doing it for 30 years. The I get you have to start with the application requirements. Then the application requirements going to drive what kind of infrastructure you need. So it always starts with what are the applications that are going to be offered to the end user on the desktop. That's going to drive what kind of device you need, because that's going to drive whether you need an operating system and what kind of operating system. Then it's going to drive the device, and then it's going to drive the management of the device. I think what we're really talking about is we have students today at the high school and the middle school who are already bringing their own device. And because there is no application requirement other than a browser, there's no management required by your team. I mean, they come in, they get on the internet, like they get on the internet because our internet is open or they have an access to that. They come in, they open their browser. We have, and I bet you, I know you can do this immediately. You can go out and look at all of the IP addresses and see all the people who are logging in, and those devices, those IP addresses are not ours.
Right.
So you could find out tomorrow morning how many people we have who are doing this. It's in our logs on our devices already. And my point is that I think what we're not really being realistic about is for a particular target community that you're talking about with the Chromebook. So we're not talking about the little kids who get an iPad from us. They're not on the table because we wouldn't do a BYOD for them. We probably wouldn't do a BYOD for our own employees. So the only universe we're talking about is students in middle school and high school. And, you know, it's already happening. That's the way IT works. And as much as an IT department wants to try to control that, that model went out the window 15 years ago. But I understand the problems of a CIO. They want to manage bandwidth, they want to manage CPU, they want to manage it all. But there's other ways you can do that on the infrastructure. And there's also other ways that you would keep the security on the infrastructure because the security is not on the device with the browser anyway. So I'm thinking we have a defined target that we should be looking at. We shouldn't look to try to boil the ocean on this item. And the one we should be talking about is how do we make it, as Peter Bernstein suggested, accept the reality that's already occurring and stop spending money buying devices for kids that don't use them and are going to use their own device. And then you can have a debate about what device do you give it. I think people don't really know. The education market used to be dominated by Apple. That is gone away. The K-12 market in the United States, a $43 billion market, and Chromebook is 60% of the market now and growing. You know, Microsoft is 22%, and I don't know with what device, and Apple's now down to 18%. So to Karen Hirsch's question, for us to equip everybody to get to a browser and browser-based applications, which would be the middle school and the high school, with a device that's shrinking in usage in K-12, that doesn't sound like the right strategy to me. But and it doesn't sound like we have application requirements that say that's necessary. But you know, hey, we're Greenwich, Connecticut. If people want to, you know, equip kids with $800 laptops, I suppose we could do differently than what the rest of the world is doing. But that doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess I want to know the numbers and the data for the students. Don't conflate it with the rest of it. And because that's a separate problem. And then the other one is, I think I'd like to know what the usage is of the Chromebooks that we've issued for that community, what percentage is doing that day in and day out over some period of time. Because if we can take that money and repurpose it, because kids are already doing it anyway, it sounds like Tony's already said, don't spend the money until we figure this out anyway. You just brought that up. We have $400 or $600,000 we're looking to repurpose. I don't know why we don't go down that road, because I think that's the de facto situation we're in. Do you have data that indicates otherwise?
Well, the problem that we're trying to solve right now at the present is that the current device is unable to handle the load, specifically unable to handle the load of the video conferencing platform that we're using. So
you're saying Google
Meet.
Yeah.
Right. So the thinking was, you know, if we were going to spend a certain amount of money on an upgrade, why wouldn't we upgrade from a Chromebook to a quote unquote real computer of some sort, whether that be a Windows computer or a Mac? And then in the options that are listed in the report, you know, obviously the Mac with the brand new M1 chip, 15 cores, you know, that is by far and away the performance leader of the pack. It's the most expensive one, but it is definitely the fastest one.
Have you called Google? Let me just ask one question and I'll shut up. There's a reason Google Meets
Mhm.
would be co-designed to properly run
Yep.
on a Google Chromebook. Did you call the
Yes.
Google people and they came in, and what was their answer?
Their answer was that the specs from our device are too low. Yes, we called
sorry.
Google support and we brought this issue to light.
What Chromebook do they recommend?
They recommended going to a Celeron-based device, the Intel architecture that's in the report. They basically said that.
Okay, so that's their recommendation of the Google Chromebook to use if you're going to run G Suite plus Google Meets.
Yep, something that has a higher spec than the device that we currently have. I had the same thought, which is Google Meet is a Google product. Chromebook is a Google product.
No, that's they build it as an integrated product.
Yeah,
Even though it's sold
so this
separately,
should
they build
work.
it,
Yep,
they
I had the
design
same
it.
train of thought.
Okay, go ahead. Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Obviously, still some thinking to do there, and we're here when you're ready for us. All right, we're going to move on to our action items. The first action item is the GHS Course of Study Guide. I am going to move this item to get it going. I move that we accept the GHS Course of Study Guide as presented. Is there a second? Ms. Hirsch, thank you. Discussion, I guess, Mr. Mayo, I don't know if there's anything you want to say before I turn it over to the board, or Ms. Talata.
Okay, Peter, yeah, a few things that I wanted to say, and we took your concerns and your questions seriously at the last meeting, at the January board meeting. We did our research. We looked at the Greenwich Public Schools policy on graduation requirements. We looked at the procedure that was written in 2019. We contacted ACT, get some data from them. We also contacted the Connecticut State Department of Education to get additional information from them about SAT scores and PSAT scores. And we also went into the state statutes to look at the current graduation requirements. And also there's a nice handout from Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents that has that breaks down or unpacks the graduation requirements. So we did all that so that we could answer some of your questions or concerns from last time. So I will turn this over to, I have Ms. Nadell, our Director of School Guidance, and Ms. Talata, our Vice Principal, and she'll tell you what we found.
Sure. Thanks, Ralph. Hi, everyone. So we did take your questions and feedback from last month, and there are 4 areas that we wanted to update you on. One of the questions was about the Capstone Experience. Could we give a little more detail to those who are looking at the Course of Study Guide? So on page 6 is where that is mentioned. And after going back to the team, we realized we could actually put a link to what's currently on our Greenwich High School website. It's found on under the teaching and learning portion, where we actually have, it was last updated in September of 2019. So it does need to be looked at again, but it does describe the Capstone Experience and what students and families can expect. The second area that we did look at was, we were asked about the ACT writing score. I'm referring specifically to page 7 under the graduation performance standards. We were asked if we would consider changing from what we had recommended as a 6 to a 6.5, because the thought was that that was what would be in line with what we're asking our students to do for the other areas. We found out from going back and looking at ACT writing that a 6 is actually proficient. A 6.5 would be goal. So to keep it in line with the others, where we are asking students to be proficient, we are recommending that we go with what we originally recommended, which was a score of a 6. The third area we looked at was the SAT and the PSAT scores. Greenwich High School uses the proficiency score that is established by the state of Connecticut, which is described, quote, as the 2nd level of achievement on the Connecticut School Day SAT. And a 420 is, in fact, it does mean that a student has met the minimum required score for the 2nd level of achievement. So we are recommending to keep the 420 as that score. We also found out, or we also said that the College Board publishes growth estimates, which would predict SAT scores based on a student's PSAT scores. Of course, a score of a 420 on the SAT would have a corresponding score lower than a 420 on the PSAT. So requiring a 420 of our sophomores and juniors on the PSAT is actually a higher standard, which we're comfortable keeping the 420 for both. And the last point we wanted to make sure we brought back to you was someone had asked about how are we going to get feedback on our current course of study guide. So I wanted to make sure you all know that 2 years ago, we actually did focus groups. We had students look at the course of study guide and give their input on it, which actually helped determine some of the changes we have made since then. Ms. Nadell, as head of our guidance department, also gathers feedback from parents and staff about the course of study guide. And an additional idea we thought that would be pretty simple to do is right on our Greenwich High School website, where we have the course of study guide posted, we could put a link to get additional feedback from anyone who's using the tool over the next few months to see how did they use it, what suggestions do they have. So we kind of thought that that might be a neat way to get some feedback.
All right, any questions from board members? If not, we'll take a vote on moving the item forward. Not seeing, oh, Mr. Chair.
Guys, I just wanted to point out to you, and I don't think, we necessarily need to deal with it right now, but I want to call something to the attention of board members. When I was doing my homework on this to figure out if I was really comfortable with what Ralph and Dana were proposing, and also because Karen and I are your representatives on the curriculum committee, there's something you should all be aware of. If you've been on the board for a little while, I know Peter has, and those some board members have been here at least 3 years, you will recall, this is before Ralph was necessarily in the job and Dana were in the job and Tony wasn't here. We used to get presentations from Chris Winters at the high school, the staff, Rick Piotrowski, who was in Dana's job, and superintendents, as well as Irene Parisi. And what they used to come to us in the board and complain quite vociferously is, as the state of Connecticut became much more strictly prescriptive in what courses needed to be taken exactly to meet course requirements, they were pointing out to us many, many times, year after year, the state of Connecticut is not doing things in the interest of kids in Greenwich schools. Our kids don't have the flexibility to take what they need to take. They can't pursue their individual interests. The system is much too rigid. They used to bring that to the board as the educators and say that over and over again. It turns out, which I was not aware, but maybe whoever's paying attention to policy, I think, I'm not sure who's on that committee, but who's ever on that committee, the state of Connecticut actually changed the statute, and they did it sometime in the last 12 to 18 months, and I wasn't aware of this. They heard complaints from school districts, and they have preserved the number of credits required to graduate, 25. They have maintained categories like humanities, STEM, language, etc. But they've removed all of the deep prescriptions course by course that made the system so rigid and brittle, which is what our administrators and educators were complaining to us as the board about, that they had hoped the state would fix. Well, it turns out the state has fixed it. But we have retained all of the old system with all of its rigidity in our graduation requirements. And as a result, it's in our course of study guide. So it was obvious to me that it doesn't align anymore. What we have is not what the state requires anymore. And what we have is not what those educators at that time wanted. And it doesn't align to our stated strategy of personalized learning and giving students more choice. So I know Ralph and Dana, I asked them about this yesterday. They were kind enough to share with me and confirm the information, and also to share kind of their point of view. I don't want to speak for their point of view. Of course, they don't want us to bring this up now because they want to get this catalog out the door. Their statement was, well, let's go study that and look at that in the future. And I understand why they would have that reaction, because they've got a tactical thing they need to do right now. And I don't want to disrupt that. But I think we need to fly back over to this target now that the state has relieved us of all these restrictions. And I would suggest that it's something that the policy committee and the strategy committee, or really the policy committee, should probably take the lead on it. But it doesn't fit to our strategy anymore. And I think we have to go back and take a look at that. And it doesn't change the number of credits. It doesn't change the categories, but we could be giving students much more flexible options to pursue what they want and align it to our personalized learning goals if we would adjust that. And that's a governance issue for the board. So I wanted to call that to everybody's attention. It's in the course of study guide. We would be, by accepting this course of study guide for another year, reinforcing that really rigid system. And I think we should change that as quickly as possible so that we meet the needs of the educators, and we align to our strategy for students about personalized learning and personalized choice.
All right, so not seeing any other hands, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. The motion is to accept the course of study guide as presented. Bernstein is a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch? Hirsch is muted. You want to give a thumbs up for a yes?
Sorry, computer issues. Sure, yes.
You're yes, okay. Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Sorry. No, I'm with Peter on this one. I think we need to spend some more time on this. So I'm no for the reasons that Peter stated.
Okay, Olson?
Yes.
And Cher?
Oh, I didn't think that would go that way. I'm gonna stay out of it for now. I don't want to get in the way of progress, but I'd like to see changes that better support our students.
So is that a yes, no, or an abstain?
Abstain.
Thank you. All right, that passes 6-1-1. Thank you very much. The next item is the monthly financial and staffing report. I will move that we accept the monthly financial and staffing report. Is there a second for that? Mr. Kelly, thank you. All right, Sean.
Okay, this is the report as of the end of January. Our expense year to date is $82.7 million, or 50.6% of our full year budget of 163.4. Spending year to year is up by at about $500,000 or 0.6%. And it's driven by, not yet reimbursed COVID related expense, overall salary increases, and higher sped tuition and settlements, and partly offset by savings in summer and ESY costs, transportation, and still having an impact year to year of the pre-spend activity. So that's on the operating summary. Capital, our overall balance is currently at $25.8 million, which is down $700,000 from last month. We're down $18.7 million compared to a year ago, including the addition of our capital appropriation of $16.4 million this year. On to school lunch. Year-to-date revenue for school lunch, we're at $654,000, which is down year to year by $987,000. Within the total revenue number, cash sales are down by a little over $1,087,000. And reimbursements are up currently by 58 in the ledger, but there's about $600,000 of reimbursements that have not yet been received or booked in Munis. Expenses, we're currently at $1,651,000, which is down year to year by $122,000 overall, driven by lower salaries and food costs and supply costs, and partly offset by higher transportation costs that for the delivery of the meals. So looking at where we are as of January for food services, right now we're looking like we're going to fall short on revenue by about $1.6 million. We do expect to come in under budget on expenses by about $800,000, leaving us with a shortfall in our net of about $800,000. Towards the end of the package, there's a monthly chart on special ed tuition, and as of February 8th, we have year-to-date expense and encumbrances on out-of-district placements of $3,625,000. That includes 30 students. Tuition settlements currently at $3,343,674, which is 47 students, and we currently have 10 pending cases that are estimated at about $538,000. So when you add those up, including the pending cases, we're currently looking at a full year number of about $7.5 million, which is about $200,000 more than our projection at the beginning of the year. COVID update. So our current COVID spending for purchases is currently at $2.575 million. And we do have an estimate for the 23.8 of FTEs that are COVID related at $1.820 million. Offsetting that, we have the 2 grants that we've previously reported on, adding up to about $2 million. But just recently, we were informed that Greenwich will be receiving the second round of the ESSER grant to the tune of $3,779,000, which can be used similarly to the ESSER round 1. So with those 3 grants combined, we're looking at about $5.7 million, which will certainly cover our year-to-date spending for COVID-related expense. Questions?
Mr. Scher.
Sean, two questions. Have you implemented changes to the transportation network to reduce any buses because our ridership is so low?
I know Ann can probably talk a little bit better than I can, but I know that they were looking at a couple of consolidations in the private schools over the last 2 weeks. But we have been looking at consolidating, gaining efficiencies all year long, and we have had some savings. And
do you know how much?
I think it's in the range of about $200,000-300,000 savings this year.
On a total transportation budget of?
About 9.7, somewhere around there. And we've also had some other savings related to the hybrid Wednesday for the high school. So we're getting savings there.
So let me just repeat that back. You said 200,000 to 300,000. So that would put us at maybe up to 4% on a $9 million budget. We've only been able to figure out how to save up to 4%. No, that can't be right, is it? Could you please go look at these numbers and come back with more specifics?
On our year-to-date savings on consolidation?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, however you do it, I'd rather be dealing with precise numbers rather than.
Fine.
Yep. And the other question is, when we had our special education review the other day in executive session, um, um, I can't talk about the details of that. There are expenses in special education that are increased this year as a result of COVID. Have those been moved out of the special education budget and into the COVID budget so that they're paid for discreetly by the town, either whether they get a grant or they don't?
We still have to go through them. I do know about $20,000 worth in one particular case.
Yeah.
We'd have to look to see, working with Mary, to see if there are any other COVID related.
I think the presentation we had tonight about community connections, and I know that in some of these things where we have to provide services to students directly, there were COVID things where we were going from one person to 3 people to have to support somebody. All that added expense, and I know there was a discussion about a number of those. I think we should take an eye towards all of those where we had to increase staffing in that 7 point whatever million. There was a lot of situations where we had to increase staffing, which must have been really expensive. I have to imagine that it's way more than 20,000 on a $7.5 million budget. I think we have to go find those and hold on. We have to find those, and well, we're prescribing the program, so we have to find those, put numbers to them, and make sure that the COVID, because all that's related to COVID, that we're getting our money back from the BET for COVID expenses. I would hate to see us have to fund COVID. I think I said this before. It was obvious to me that we were funding COVID in our increases in our regular special education budget. And we got to go get that money back out of the COVID budget from the town of Greenwich.
Okay, we'll work on it.
Thank you.
Tony or Ann, do you want to address the consolidation of bus routes for private school, because that's come up now?
Sure. Do you want me to, Ann?
Sure.
Yeah. So we have been working on consolidating the routes, that's public school and private, with the bus consultant that's been working with us for the last 2.5 years. And this is part of a planned consolidation of routes that private schools knew about before the year started. We also do have 1 or 2 routes that are actually public school in this consolidation that's happening right now. And so it's a matter of trying to look at the pre-COVID numbers so that when we consolidate a route, we're not going based on what's happening in COVID, where we are socially distancing on the buses, because the buses have to run very light right now for those families that rely on that transportation, and because we can't cohort obviously on a bus. But we're going through those consolidations right now, and those have taken place where we are looking for route efficiency, and that's public and private.
Just to add to that, I know you mentioned this morning when we were talking to the BET, or maybe you mentioned it on Friday, I don't know, it's all blurring together now, that some of those buses had 2 or 3 students on them, and that's $90,000 a bus. So efficiency seems to make a whole lot of sense to me. Ms. Kowalski.
Thanks, Peter. So I have a question regarding the deficit related to the school lunches. Does this account for any of the potential federal funds that we can get because of the National School Free Lunch Program that we can qualify for?
Question. The funds that we've received so far, we can use to the extent that there is COVID related spending. But as far as the loss of revenue, we would not be able to use the funds to cover loss of revenue.
So, but when we're not in COVID, right, there are certain children qualify for free lunches, if I understand the program correctly.
And we're getting reimbursed for that.
We are getting. How do we differentiate that when we're giving every kid a free lunch at the moment.
And you know the details of how it differentiates between regular free and reduced versus everybody on free?
So, am I
Okay.
good now?
Yeah,
Okay.
she can hear you.
Yeah, we
Thank-
can hear you.
So everybody gets a free lunch and a free breakfast because we applied for that particular grant for the National School Lunch Program. It
Okay.
actually is a summer feeding program, which started because of COVID. So that's something that the federal government has done. We applied for it and we were accepted. So that's that reimbursement that we get from the state every month. So that's our income that's offsetting some of our costs in the food services budget. So that's a good thing. The only thing that the COVID expenses may be able to cover may be, and we're not sure because of the federal support that they're giving us, would be the busing for the bus stops that we have, but that would be the only thing so far.
I think the busing would be covered.
I think it would be too, but we're still checking with the feds for that program to make sure that that is a reimbursable cost.
I mean, the busing attributed to delivering food to
Correct.
those children that are in the remote school.
All through the summer, we fed our
All through the summer, right? Okay.
under the 18 and under.
Okay, so essentially the money that we're bringing in still leaves us and providing essentially a reduced or free lunch that we're getting paid for, compensated by the grants. It still leaves us at a deficit of 0.8.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Miss Downey.
I know it's late, so I'm gonna be quick. Sean, and we may have asked these before, so I apologize. On the general fund revenue, we have lower out of district tuition income and preschool tuition income. Are those the numbers that are in the last column, the actual? Those are going to be projected for the year, or those are just year to date?
Those are year to date.
Okay, so we may get to those numbers, or
Yes.
okay, fine. Then on the staffing, there was something mentioned about a custodial temp, or I know Dan during our budget call the other day mentioned a real need for custodial help. So I don't know if one temp is enough, or I don't know.
Well, we did try to get some flex, full-time flex custodial help, but it was not approved, and the suggestion was that we go for permanent part-time, but we had been doing that. In fact, at the beginning of the year, we were looking to hire 13, part-time people, and we were successful in only getting a couple.
Okay. When you say, wait, I'm sorry, you said we were turned down?
Yeah, we had formally requested to the BET to allow us to hire 2 full-time custodians, because when someone is out sick or on leave of absence, we're having to fill those positions with overtime. So our overtime costs are pretty high. So we felt that we could self-fund, or mostly self-fund, the cost of the 2 full-time custodians with reductions in overtime.
And then, okay, so hence you're doing it with temps, or part-time rather.
Yeah, I mean, we have to revisit the request again, I think, because the need is still there.
Okay, that's fine, because Dan had mentioned it the other day. Okay, those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to take a vote on the motion to approve the monthly financial and staffing report. Bernstein is a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
And Cher.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and there's 2 transfers that.
Hang on, Sean, we got to make a motion to put it on the table. It's an action item, but I appreciate you're trying to move us out of here. I'll move that we accept the budget transfers. Is there a second for that? All right, Ms. Stowe, I see you. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, there were two budget transfers. If you look in what was posted, there was a file with two transfers, and then there was a second file. The second file needs to be deleted, so that shouldn't have been posted. But the first transfer is a 68,800 transfer from language arts, professional learning, and substitutes expense to cover needs for teaching supplies. And the second one is an $18,500 transfer in social studies from software to teaching supplies. And the software are subscriptions that were determined to be redundant and could be eliminated. I think the expiration date of the subscription was, I think, January 31st. So a decision was made to eliminate those redundant ones, and that saved some money. And then there was also another subscription for online textbook that came in with a lower cost than budgeted.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate your going back and adding in the details. I know that that was a document you need to do to update. I guess the learning, Sean, and I want to make sure I understand this, is we zeroed out a lot of learning supplies last year in order to get to the 0% increase. Is this the result of that?
I suspect it's related. I mean, I don't have a definitive answer on that as to why, if the supplies were pre-spent in June of last year, why we need additional supplies. I guess it could be that there was just not enough budgeted to begin with.
Right, well, that's a possibility. Or I know in the case of, art, each kid now has their own dedicated package of crayons. In science, they've got their own lab, glasses and setup. So just a different circumstance. All right, Mr. Scher.
Yeah, I don't understand that answer, Sean, because we pre-ordered $2 million. And I think I asked that question at the time, and you said, yep, we got it all covered. We ordered everything we anticipated needing and ordering, and we got all the POs in. I mean, that was your answer at the time. So can you please dig into this? And I'd really like to know why this is happening, because we went through that whole drill of dragging that $2 million worth of expense into the year. And, you guys talked about, how difficult it was in that short period of time to get all those POs out. So I'd really like to understand what the delta is here.
Okay.
Because it's, and by the way, if it's something we didn't anticipate and it's COVID, it's because of COVID yet again. It's a COVID expense and it should be in the COVID budget. It's not, it shouldn't be coming out of our regular operating budget.
If it was COVID related, they would have highlighted it as COVID, and we would have let that go.
I mean, I was just referring to Peter Bernstein's question about crayons.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
right.
If I have to have more crayon packs that I didn't anticipate because of COVID, that's got to come out of the COVID budget.
That would have been charged to the COVID account.
Yeah, not with this kind of transfer.
Yeah.
Right.
But generally speaking, yes, we did do the pre-spend,
right.
And but I don't have the details as to this
if
specific.
You could follow up, that would be great.
What's that?
If you could follow up, that would be great.
Okay, terrific.
Ms. Hirsch.
While others are looking at at the items we needed to purchase in the teaching supplies, I'm more focused on the professional learning that we've foregone at 40, for 42,000. I understand why you don't need the substitutes if you're not doing the professional learning, but I'm more curious, and I know you probably won't have the answer tonight, to know what professional learning we've pushed to the side to purchase more supplies.
Yep, I'll get the answer to that as well.
Actually, Sean, I think it was on the original document, and I think somebody may have edited it for brevity, but my recollection is that it was travel expenses for professional development because people aren't going to conferences. But you can verify that, but I'm pretty sure that's okay. What was there before it got edited and updated.
Yep.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a vote on the budget transfers. And as Sean said, we're only voting on the actual transfers, not that other page, which is going to get deleted. So Bernstein is a yes. Stowe.
Yes.
Hirsch.
Yes.
Downey.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Kowalski,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
and Cher.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Agenda plan, just to let everybody know, our next meeting is a retreat. Should hopefully have the Linkit data, strategic plan. Peter, I've got time for you there. And
Yeah, and as I said the other day, just as last time we talked about that, I think what's labeled there. I mean, I realize we have the placeholder, and what the label there is the description is not correct. But Peter, I'll send you a separate.
yeah, if you do that, we'll get that updated at the next chair meeting. And then if there's any updates we need on the buildings, obviously we'll go ahead and add that at the earliest meeting. All right, with that, Mr. Kelly, do you have a motion you wanted to make?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I would like to adjourn.
I'm going to second that motion. And seeing no debate on that, Bernstein's yes, Stowe,
Yes.
Hirsch,
Yes.
you don't want to leave? Downey,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kowalski,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
and Cher.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you to the 21 people that braved this out to the end. All right, everybody, be careful in the snow in the morning. Tony, got anything you want to tell us?
No, because I've been in meetings all day. I've got to watch the weather.
All right, well, good luck on your call with the police and the DPW and the weather folks in the morning. All right,
Sorry.
have a good night. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.